Actually, I was doing research here, and but clearly the most important person in your family is your wife, Joan. She gets some really rave reviews.
Oh, really?
I was curious. First of all, how did you guys meet? And
oh my goodness.
yeah.
Actually, I met her brother. We were in a bowling league together in the winter, and I had been racing for a year or two, and then he started building a race car, and one thing led to another, and he said, come on up to the garage. And at that time, you can't see it in there, but see that was I broke my knee racing, and I was on crutches, had cast on at the time. So I stopped in Ron's garage and I was standing there on crutches and stuff, and there's these young
This
little...
is Ron Davies, right?
Yes. These young chicks running around, carrying on, trying to distract everybody, and well, you know how that goes. And then the next thing you know, one of the guys goes, hey, we're going to the Pizza Hut. And we didn't have a Pizza Hut in Warren at the time. We had one in Jamestown. Would you like to go with us? Well, that's where it all started. I ended up dating Joan. I didn't even know. There was 3 or 4 girls there, and they were all cousins. I didn't even know which one was Ron. I knew one of them was Ron's sister. I didn't know which one, but ended up dating Ron's sister, and from there to a lifetime. So.
Well, for those on the camera, she's featured at great length at the Times Observer article. It's June 23rd, 2025. Including a picture of her favorite, clearly, it's the dog Piper.
Yeah, you see, I'm not in it.
I noticed that. Again, I'll drop that in. You'll see it on the camera.
That's Piper, by the way. That's Piper. Yeah.
Piper made that cut.
Yeah.
Miles did not, but you are mentioned in the postscript. You mentioned the fact that you met her principally because you were racing at the time.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad, and were they in the racing world?
Yeah, my dad was a farmer by trade when he was born and raised, and he knew he didn't want to do that for a living. He told me, he says, a farmer doesn't make any money, but he went to work at a place called PDM in Warren, and we were kind of raised that way, and he was an excellent fabricator, all that kind of stuff, and one thing led to another. Him and my uncles raced together, and so I was always going up there. My mom would take me, and we'd sit when I was a little thing, and watch the jalopy races. That's what they had, was jalopies.
Where did they race?
Primarily State Line. Sometimes they only raced, back then, jalopies, they raced them maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And they'd start, and I think there were so many of them, they were like 3 abreast. It was like an enduro. And I can remember my dad had his car stuck in the fence one day, and he couldn't get away from the fence, and I ran down the stretch and waved to him, and he waved back to me, and then the races were going on, It was something back then, but they had a good time, and I don't think it cost them a lot of money, and that's how I got involved.
So you're the kid following Dad. Did you go to the garage? Did you kind of help out?
Oh, I was the tool man. When I was little, they'd be out there working on the car. He'd be under the car. Go get this, go get that. And that's how I learned, the old 9/16. I said, what sizes to get. And yeah, it was fun. He'd work out. And they didn't have a garage back then. He worked out back and had a tripod, and if the weather was bad, they either covered it with plastic or they didn't work on it. But
now you said your dad grew up on a farm. Where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was actually born in Kane.
Okay.
We lived in Sheffield, and my dad was in the service then, and he'd have to go spend a couple weeks away. Well, just so happens my mom went to stay with her mom while my dad was away, and I was born while that happened. But.
So Sheffield, Kane. My whole family's from Ludlow, Pennsylvania.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's cool. But I was raised in Clarendon, so that's where we started all our carrying on with racing.
So when did you kind of take it somewhat seriously? Were you at the high school there in Clarendon?
Warren.
Warren.
Yeah.
Warren, and graduated what class?
Yep, 73.
73?
Yep. I was actually played baseball. I loved baseball, but I loved racing too. And I figured after 12 grades, I didn't want to go to school anymore. I had a college coach call me and want me to come and, you know, talk to him. And it was actually Penn State Barron. And I said, Coach, I'm sick of school. I'm done with school. And actually, after high school, I played in the Great Belt League. You ever heard of the Great Belt League?
Yep.
Yeah. Played that for a couple of years, and then racing took over.
How did it take over in the sense, did you start, you know, working with your dad, and was there anybody else involved in your family?
Not for a while. I had a younger brother, but he's like 11 years younger than me. He come on eventually. But it was my dad and I and an uncle, you know. I can remember I was starting, my dad said, I told my dad I'd like to race. He said, well, he says, you're on your own. He said, I can't afford to help you. And I said, okay, you know, and I knew that. I understood. But one day he come home and there was a 57 Chevy sitting in the driveway. And he said, what's that? And I said, that's my new race car. And well, he helped me build it, and we went racing. And another thing was, when I was in high school, Walt Smith was my instructor. So I, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess you could say. And I had a lot of influence, and it was all good.
So your first car was a 57?
Yeah, yeah.
And what'd you have in it?
Oh, geez, for an engine, it was just a 283.
Right.
You're only allowed whatever came in the car that year. It was a hooligan or cadet, whatever they called them back then. And it was exciting. I built the engine in Votech, and, you know, we got the car out back and rolled the roll bars in it and went racing. Didn't have a clue what we were doing, but we had a good time.
So you did that in the Votech area.
Yeah.
Did your students, were they curious about all of a sudden, here's a car, and you're putting a paint number on it and all that stuff?
And not too much. I didn't take it to school. You know, it was kind of when I graduated. You had to be like 18 to race when I was there. I thought that's the rule I'd heard, but I know there was other guys racing earlier, like Craig Briggs and them. But his dad, you know, let him do that. Chubb. Yeah, it was. We just built it out back in the yard and went racing, and there was a couple kids that would come with me from the Votech class, and I can remember my third race out, I won the feature.
Wow.
At Knox. $15 to win. I'll never forget that. $15. Oh my goodness.
So just though, your first race, you're kind of going on after you do the warm-ups, and all of a sudden the green flag comes down, and now it's real.
Yeah.
What was your stomach telling you?
Oh, I really, it didn't, I can't remember exactly, but I don't think I was that nervous. But I do know my first race was at Erie. Went in the first corner and turned the car right around, completely right around, you know. Didn't have a clue what I was doing, but was having a good time.
Was it a big class, hooligans at that
Oh,
time?
yeah, there was a lot of them. A lot of cars.
So, and what year was that, 74?
5, I believe.
Okay.
I think it was 5. We built the car during the 74, and 75 we started. I think maybe at Knox in 74, because we got the car finished at the end of the year, and State Line was closed, and we went to Knox and raced. And they were racing in the afternoons, like Sunday afternoons, and third time down there. And my dad would run the heat races, and I'd run the feature, and flat-toed all the way to Knox and back. Oh my gosh, crazy. And I can remember sitting in Clarendon, and Squirt would go by flat-toeing, and he came clear from Brockway, you know. So I guess that was the thing to do back then.
At those early days, were there heroes? Did you have people you kind of looked up to?
Oh, I loved to watch Squirt race. I liked to watch Ronnie Blackmer. They were pretty good, and they didn't hammer their way to the front, but they could get to the front, you know. Schnars was another one. He did a good job. Yeah, I can't really put a finger on it. Oh, well, John Wiedmeyer. I don't know if you guys know him, how well you know him, but my dad actually worked with him for a while, and John found out that my dad was a good fabricator and he worked on race cars. So in my young teens, I would go with him to the garage and work on John Wiedmeyer's race car.
Terrific. So this would have been, so we're starting in 75, hooligan class. How long were you there in the hooligans?
Oh, 2 years. I had the 57, and then I bought a car from a guy by the name of Rudy Rudolph. You guys know him?
I do.
He had a Chevelle, and we went and bought that because that year about the 57, they upped the years for the race cars, and you could go to a Chevelle and run 327s then, which were a little better, or you could have run a big block, but we ran that Rudy's car for a year, and then really got crazy. We decided to buy a Sportsman. That was Stacy Gerdak's car. Bought it from Stacy Gerdak and ran that for a year, and that's where I got this nice scar on my knee. Yeah.
How'd that happen?
Jumped wheels. Lars and I were running side by side and jumped wheels and went right in the wall. The car, the brakes don't work when the tires are off the ground, you know. And
you knew physics, yeah.
Yeah. Destroyed the car. So my dad and I decided if we're going to put all the money in a new car, we might as well build a late model. It was the same price, and that's what we did.
What year was that?
Oh gosh, let me see, be 5, 6, 7 or 8. It's been so long ago I forget. But Tony White built it. Tony White built us the chassis, and we put the car together and raced it.
Yeah, I'm looking at Randy's got a bunch of pictures of you, and I'm sure you do too, but 1978 is the first time a late model shows up.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's...
Yeah.
75 was Hooligan, 76 was Cadet, 77 was Sportsman, 78 is probably a late model. Yeah.
Was that a big jump for you? I mean, other than the car itself, the obvious, but now you're racing with different racers.
Yeah. It wasn't much different than the Sportsman that I can remember. It was a bigger jump because we decided to put more money in it that way. It was, and you know, the first night out we destroyed the good engine we had, so we were running junk after that, but that was just stupidity on our part, so.
you do the economics of it all? Were you getting sponsors and stuff?
Yeah, we had a few here and there, but it was mostly my dad and I doing it all. And, you know, you use the money you won with. And if you didn't make it win or didn't finish, you didn't make money. And that was my objective through the years, is you had to finish, and preferably in the top 10 to make money to keep going, go next week. You know, I wish I had a couple offers from people to come drive for them, and I probably should have took it, but I didn't want to leave my dad, you know, because we had been in it together, and so we stayed, you know, family oriented, and I probably could have done a lot better if taking those other rides, but I didn't.
So when you, just going back, when you first started, you had a number 143. Is there relevance behind that?
Actually, it was. And I think I told Randy back in the day there was a jalopy wreck in one of his photos, and there was a 143 in it. That was my dad's car, and he was sitting in the middle of the pileup. But that was his clock number at work, and his buddies that he was with, they didn't know what number to put on it, and one of his buddies painted 143 on the side of it, and you know, that's where it ended up. But I was a Richard Petty fan. Everybody said, well, you got that from Petty. Well, not really, you know, but it's a good number to have, I mean.
And then 143 morphed into?
Yeah, it morphed into 43. I think Leonard came to me one day and asked me if we'd drop one of the digits, because, you know, back then they scored by hand, and they were writing numbers, and the girls that were doing the scoring requested, and it wasn't that hard to do. We just dropped the 1, and then every place we went, there was also a number 43 there, so you either had to add the 1 back on or put an S on the end of it, or, you know, it was, and I'm sure, you know, everybody's gone through that, but
plus it's a popular number.
Yeah, I guess so.
You mentioned Leonard Briggs. At the time, the ownership structure of State Line was Leonard Briggs and Jerry and Don Franks and Lloyd Williams. How was your relationship with those guys?
That was pretty good. I think about the only one that really ever come around was Leonard. You know, Don was probably always up in the announcing booth, and Jerry was probably taking care of the track. I don't know, but Leonard, he'd always come around cracking jokes and stuff, or, you know, saying this or that, and he had a pretty neat lineup system. I kind of back then I didn't like it, but as I've gone and thought about it over the years, it was pretty good, because he always had a way to make a guy some money. And, you know, they had like 3 heats, and they'd put the so-sos in the first, and then the medium guys, and then the fast guys. And after you won so much money in that first heat, you know, he'd say, well, it's time for somebody else, and he'd move you up to the second heat, and before you know it, you're in the third heat, you know. But it was good. And then he had a good system where not everybody was you know, the fast guys didn't start up front all the time, and it made it, I think it made more interesting racing back in the day.
How would he, I know the final was often the winner the last week would be pushing the field.
Yeah, somewhere back there, I can't remember.
Back, yeah. And do you know, could you understand how that all worked? Was it based on the position the week before? Or?
Yeah, I think it was based on the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I kind of got it figured out towards the end of it there, that I could always see the guys that were playing the starts. If you ever watched, Dave Turner was always in the front row on the big races, okay? And there was a couple other guys that did the same thing, and they would kind of play the system. And finally, I started figuring out, hey, there is a system to this. But if you ever go back and look at this. I don't know if you have the starting lineups, but you can see who was doing the work, being the smartest out there. And by the time I got it figured out, that's when they decided to sell the place.
But to your knowledge, there was a system, so it wasn't Leonard discretionarily say,
right.
You're here, you're there.
Yeah, I heard a bunch of guys say, well, Leonard didn't like me, so he always started me in the back. Well, that wasn't true. He just, you were always finishing first, second, or third, so you're going to start back there. So it was all right.
Now, as I recall, Leonard's daughter married into you're kind of related in a sense, aren't you?
Yeah. Ron, my brother-in-law, married Kathy Briggs, and so there's a group there of a bunch of racers on one street, and actually John Hedman lived probably a quarter mile from us too, so there was a lot. And then the Davies were related to the Hoffmans. Margaret Hoffman was Alfred Davies' sister. And so there was 4 or 5 of us running late when I was all at one time that were related. So, and that's where Dan Beckwith got it the other day about everybody's related. Do you remember in his interview, he said...
Armbruster?
Yeah, Armbruster. Yeah, he said a lot of those guys were related. Well...
They were.
Yeah.
That's where I was going, yeah.
Yeah.
Based on Danny Staples.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I like Danny.
So yeah, all of that was kind of related. And did that come up at all during this, when you were racing, like you guys were
not really
in a circle?
Not really. I mean, if somebody needed some help or something somewhere, but everybody had their own individual styles and stuff. And I know a couple times when Timmy Hoffman bent a car up pretty bad one time, my dad went down and helped him build a new one, but we were all pretty much on our own, I think.
Did Leonard was also, aside from just keeping things light and lively, but also the disciplinarian? I mean, he's the rule book guy, right?
Yeah.
Look at him laugh. Were you ever a victim of that?
A little bit. He came to us one time and said something wasn't the right height, and my dad said, "Oh, your rule's wrong." My dad got his rule out. Well, my dad had and he said this, and Leonard said, "This one's no good, right?" And my dad said, "It can't be," and so he threw it out through the woods. And we just stood there watching, and Leonard turned around and walked away. He said, "Fix it." But it was just a spoiler height, it wasn't anything too spectacular. And back then, I don't know how much the spoilers helped you anyway, so.
Did you take some liberties with the rules?
Tried. Yeah. You weren't cheating, you weren't winning most of the time. I had in my first car that Tony White built for us, I had like 3 holes you could move the motor back or forward or whatever, and had to carry an extra drive shaft. But other than that, I didn't do a lot until they started fudging with tires. And those darn old Hoosier recaps weren't worth a crap as far as I was concerned. And the S&E tires, you couldn't get a hold of anything with them. But then I found a guy, his name was Tal City Retreads, and I called him, and he says, "I can fix you right up." So he says, what are you allowed? And I said, "We're allowed 11 inches. And he said, 11-inch casings or what? And I said, "Well, casings." He says, "I'm sending you some 12-inch tires." And we went out there and started winning. And then, if you remember, the old Hoosier tires had a big crown on them. You had about that much of it on the ground, and the rest of it was nothing. Well, these were nice and flat, and then everybody started complaining about this and that and tires, and then finally, I think Leonard opened it up so you could run a good tire. But it was that we went to new tires then, and Al Davies got in that Goodyear dealership, and those tires, I wish Goodyear had never quit, because those tires worked good, But
why did they have a specific tire? Was that just to be regular, or did they have a business in that tire?
I don't think he did. I think Turner and Scott sold the recaps, and that's what everybody wanted, was those Hoosier recaps back in the day. Nobody knew any different until, that's another story. Chuck Piazza was down south racing, And he told all his buddies up here what to run, and so you couldn't beat these guys unless you knew somebody down south. And that's finally how I got into the Towel City thing. I met the guy at a show, and I said, "Man, these tires are nice." And he says, "What are you running?" And I told him. He says, he says, "Call me when you get back home. I'll send you something." And that's what happened. I got those Towel Cities, and it really did good. I was probably king of the hill for a month there before everybody figured out what I was doing. It was.
Well, for the camera, what was King of the Hill?
Oh, that was different. That was Franny's dream, I think, there, where he put, I think he had a couple, you could challenge whoever was winning. They put 2 cars out there at the beginning of the year, and if that guy won, he could race next week, and they challenged him. He had to pay $50 or something like that. It was interesting. But I'd get in it every once in a while. He'd come to me and say, "You want to get in it again?" If I'd lose, I'd always wait, because it was hard. You had a heat race, and you had King of the Hill, and you had the feature. And once you lost the King of the Hill, I let it slide for a while. I wouldn't get right back into it. And then he'd come and say, "Well, I may be challenging this week. You want to do it?" Well, okay. But it was, I don't know how many years he did it. Do you remember? I don't remember either. But I know the year I won the point championship, I was king of the hill at both tracks also. And I don't know anybody who knows that, but I had won the last couple. And the last state line was, I beat Barton. You guys were going to, I think, Pennsboro the next day or something. Remember that? And I had it on film. I had my sister and brother-in-law were filming it. Well, my sister started jumping up and down on the bleachers. My brother-in-law was going like this. So he didn't see the rest of the race from like the whole last lap.
Well, that's exciting. We should probably get a copy of it.
I know. If I can find it, I would.
Now in late model. And did you have instant success, or did it kind of take?
No, it took a while. I can't remember. I think it was 2 years before I won my first late model feature. 2 years, and it was the last night at Erie, and it had rained all day, and I never got a picture of it because Olin Seidler never showed up, and it was the last race of the year, and I won. It was a 50-lap race, and I won it, but never. I don't even have a picture of it, and it's too bad because I'd have loved to have had one.
So it took 2 years, but then did you find yourself?
Yeah, we were slowly moving up the charts, and finally we found ourselves running in the top 10 in the points, and then top 5 in the points, and it just kept, getting better and better and better.
Who were the guys you had to leapfrog over and look towards? I mean, who were the big dogs then?
I would say probably, Keith Clark, Buddy Erickson, and Ronnie was doing good then. Skip was doing very well. And Schnars was out of it by then. He'd quit. Dick Barton, he was coming in to his own, and those are Lars Hewlings was another good one. I don't know if I had more time, I could think of a bunch of them, but there was, everyone was an obstacle as far as I was concerned, because like I said, we had to finish well or we weren't running the next week. So,
did you drive accordingly so that you weren't overly aggressive?
I don't think so. I think that was part of my problem. I knew I had to make money and got into a lot of things that I shouldn't have, but
We've asked the question of others that if you had to go on to your last lap and you're actually in the lead, and is there somebody you really didn't want to have behind you, who would that person be?
Well, I heard your other interviews, and they all said Tom Dill, but he was on his way out when I did get to race against him, but man, probably a clean, I don't remember anybody would take you out on the last lap. They may, but I'll tell you what, Skip Furlow took a couple away from me, and he was clean about it. So I would say Skip, was very good. But he was one that started in the back, and he'd have to come all the way up, to the front. And Dick was good. He was clean, I mean, there was a lot of guys that could pass you on the last lap if you weren't smart enough. But I don't remember anybody taking anybody out after Tom left.
You saw that. Right?
Yeah. I can remember one night I saw him at Erie. Went right out of the pits into first and second turn, come back out on the racetrack and keep right on racing. I went through the pits. I don't know what happened or why he went through the fence or whatever, but he just kept right on going. He was a character.
Yeah. We had lots of fun with him.
Yeah.
So 1989, you were the State Line Late Model Champion. Did you know as the season was ending that you were at that point?
Yeah, we did. I never started the season watching points or anything, but halfway through I had this uncle that kept coming to me and say, you know where you're at? You know where you're at? And no, he'd always bring me the book and show me because I never bought those magazines. My dad did, but I didn't. And he said, you can win this, you can win this. So we started, playing accordingly. And once I found something where the car was half decent, I didn't change it a lot. And probably should have, experimented there, but I didn't dare experiment because you don't want to lose too many positions out there. So, but I can tell you that first year that we won the points, that was the first Burt transmission that was ever at State Line Erie Speedway. And I had it. That was the first year. And the reason I had it was the guy I bought the chassis from said, you want to win? And I said, yeah. He says, you need one of these. And it was a Burt. And I bought it back. It was a Shaw chassis. And you know who was good for Shaws? Yeah. And we bought it, and we had a 355 motor that year and kicked butt with it. With that transmission did the job for us,
Just again for the camera, what would the Burt be?
Oh, it was just a little aluminum transmission, and it only had two forward speeds, and had I think it was a Honda motorcycle clutch in, and it was internal. And you actually had to push the clutch to get the car to move instead of letting out. And once you got it up to speed, you had to rack it into high because it was just direct drive right then. From the motor to the rear end, it was all direct. Wow. And it did have a reverse in it, but those transmissions were tough. Oh, I couldn't believe how tough those things were. I thought when we got it, man, I'm going to have trouble, but once you learned how to work it, man, it worked good.
Were Burts legal in '89, Miles, or were you on the edge of the rules?
I don't know if they were legal or illegal. I think they said the transmission had to have a forward gear in it and a clutch. That's in the rules at that time, but I don't know. I know you guys experimented with a 2-speed rear end one time, and I didn't know how that worked for you. I never asked. But when when Larry Shaw, we went out to pick up the car, and he called me in the office, and he says, "Do you see that?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "That's worth about a couple tenths a lap." And he was right. It was more than a couple tenths a lap because we got that. That was probably the secret for a year or two till everybody else started catching on. But I was also, I can't remember what year it was, the first guy that had an aluminum late model body. Back when we built our own chassis, it was after Tony White. It was the first aluminum body up there. It was a red car with a white roof. There's probably a picture. I know there's a picture of it in your thing, but that was the first aluminum body. So, I didn't know at the time. I didn't know we were innovators at the time, but it worked out well.
Who were the innovators? Was that you or you and your dad? Did you kind of...
Actually, we would go to the trade shows in Florida because Alfred Davies had a house down there, and we would go down and watch the Daytona 500, and we'd go over to the trade show, and you'd see all these things in there, and you'd say, man, that might work, you know. but there was one thing that I saw that I never tried, and that was the thing that hooked to your throttle there, and the wheel to keep the wheel spin down. A guy worked really hard on me to keep that. It was electronically controlled, and you know, a lot of people will accuse us of having it because I didn't spin, but the reason I didn't spin is because I didn't have much motor. So.
So you have success in '89. Did you race just at State Line and maybe Erie's, or was there other tracks you raced at?
In '89?
Well, about that time period, did you
Yeah.
go other tracks?
Yeah, I went to Challenger a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Really liked that track. It was ice and easy on tires, and I was an American Racer guy at that time, and they were always there. They could help me, and then '89 we won the points, and you know, that half a year really, I mean, trying to make sure that we were always winning or finishing. And I said to my dad, what do you want to do next? And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to kind of go out and race other places. So in '90 we went Stars racing. And I ended up the Rookie of the Year in the Stars in 1990.
What was Stars? Again, for the camera.
Oh, man, it was a group. It's called Short Track Auto Racing Stars or something. I think that's where the abbreviation came from. But they were run by a couple of really nice guys, actually. And one of them raced himself. And Doc, I don't know if you remember Doc.
Lehman.
Yeah, he was kind of the mechanic, I think, on the other guy's car. But we saw a lot of different tracks that year.
So it's like a circuit.
Yes, it was a circus, sort of like now they have, only the circuits they have now are a lot bigger. That ULMS kind of reminds me of Stars back in the day. But man, those guys now. Whew.
How did you afford to run Stars, Miles?
Well,
'Cause that even back then, it took a lot of money.
Yeah, it did. But the money I saved not buying those tires every week, and American Racer, we'd go down there and he'd load up my trailer with tires. And he'd say, I got everything written down, and what you use, you pay for, and what you don't, you bring back. And so most of the tracks you were going out that way somewhere, they were in Indiana, PA, and we'd load up tires and go to these tracks and race and pay for what we use. And they would always send guys over to my trailer to get tires too, because they would run out of tires in their truck. You know, so we helped them, they helped us. It worked out for us, you know. I mean, that's the only way we could afford to race. The quick fill downtown would give us gas cards, so we could go, you know, stop at quick fill stations and get gas for the vehicles. But other than that, it was, you know, same deal, State Line. I always had to finish good to go the next week.
Normally in a race, how many tires would you go through?
Oh, wow. If it was State Line, you'd go through a couple. You know, usually if you were lucky, you'd only wear out 3 a weekend. If you weren't lucky, you'd wear out 4 or 5. But you know, that was the big expense for us. And tires, you had to have tires to win. You couldn't run crap. You know. We just found that out earlier. Tires was the biggest thing. Even talking to Larry Shawn, Larry helped me a lot. He said, tires. Tires. And we went to Pennsboro one year, and he was down there, and I had a bunch of American Racers on the rack and stuff, and he says, you got to get rid of those. Go Hoosier, he said.
Were you the guy that actually worked on the tires? You know, we've had other people talk about, I don't know what the term is, whether it's shaving them or...
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that?
Yes. Yeah, I would sit there with a razor blade, try to make new tires out of old ones. It was, you know, if we had over half the tread left, we'd polish them up and make them work again. But, you know, like I said, I mean, to go out and qualify, you had to have special tires. And that's going back to the King of the Hill. I had a special set of tires we put on for the King of the Hill. It was, I can't remember the guy's name. He was from Fort LaBeouf over in that area, and he sold tires at Conneaut. Well, he come one day and he said to me, I got some modified tires here you might want to try. He said, they say 11 inches on them, but they're 13 inches wide. So we mounted them. They were soft, you know, and we put them on the wheels and kept them in the trailer just for the King of the Hill races.
This is sort of inside racing.
Yeah.
Inside racing. So, did you find the economics as things progressed and the cost increased?
Oh, wow.
Was there a point where you kind of were looking at your dad and now your brother who's working with you and saying, wow.
Yeah, it was getting out of hand, you know. We would, I can remember when we first started racing, there was a guy down at Siegel and Son that, and he was really into racing. He'd say, come on down, go through the pile, see what you need for motors, and take them home, and bring me back what you don't use. And we'd take them home 5 at a time and take them apart and see what we could use and what we couldn't, and take the rest back to him. And yeah, he was good that way, but you couldn't do that towards the end of our career. You had to shell out some bucks and go get a motor. And probably our best years are when we had Jim Cunningham building our motors. We would pay him to rent his motors, and that was our best years. 89 was one of his years, and 90, 91, 92, 90, 91, I think we raced with him for 3 years.
Randy Anderson, the source of all knowledge, better than Wikipedia.
Is that what he's called?
Yeah, that's what he said. Oh. He said, it seems to me, this is his comment to me, that Miles did not race consistently every year. I think he took some years off. The last photo I have is from 2007. And that he won 5 late model races at State Line and 8 at Erie's.
Total? Yeah. There was a year or two I took off in there. We were just getting so far behind in expenses and stuff. We just sold everything and got out of it for a little bit, and then I went up there and won an enduro race, and we had enough money to buy a car, and we bought one of old Dick's old cars. Remember that? And started racing again.
It's in your blood, man.
Yeah, that was a stupid move. I should have went on vacation.
A race or 2 or 3 that sort of stand out, Miles, and say, when you sit down with your grandson, he goes, and once they're interested, they're going to say, tell me about that.
Oh, wow. As far as standing out, well, that first one I told you, that $15 one, that's always going to be in my mind, you know.
Of course.
Yeah. And then when I went to Tri-City one time, it doesn't mean much, but back then you couldn't run a quick change rear end at Tri-City. When Walt Smith and Gary Littlefield were down there, they had those big block motors and those big humper tires, and I went down there and kicked their butt with a 327, and I think I made Walt's day that day, but you know, and then I can't remember. I think winning the Heil Russell race, or no, it was Dean Layfield. It was Dean Layfield. I might have won both of them. I can't remember, but the Dean Layfield was one, and they had Dean's family come and present the trophy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was nice. And then going over to Smethport, and I don't know how much you guys know about that, but well, you guys were there. I think you were there that day. It was an all-day thing, and they had King of the Hill race was for all the feature winners that year, and they had a trophy that was like 6 foot tall, and I can remember my wife there we had a grill on the trailer, and she's making hamburgers, and she says, your hamburger's ready, and I went over to get it, and they were calling me to go out for the King of the Hill race, and Dick Barton was standing there talking to me, and he goes, "I'll eat it." So he ended up eating my hamburger that day.
So you made the money.
Yeah, I went out and won that King of the Hill, won that big trophy, and then I think I won the heat race, started up front, and won the big feature that night. So that was a day that I can, and that was in Dick's old car. That was
The
88.
only thing you really remember is Dick eating your hamburger.
Yeah, the son of a gun.
Randy delivered the message.
Is he even around anymore?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard he had a place down in Florida and he was
Yeah.
soaking in the sun. Oh.
Half the year there,
Oh,
half
okay.
the year here.
Yeah. That gets Dick right now calling saying, you know,
Yeah. What do you? I can hear you talking about me.
yeah, forget about the hamburger. You'd have to probably go to Shawbucks over here.
Oh.
That's where they have chicken wings. Was it hard to simply say enough?
Yeah, it is.
Right.
And I got to the point where my daughters were all getting older and they were into sports and activities. And Tiffany, which was married Kelly Fredress, she was a cheerleader and all this and that. And we'd go to the games, you know, for her. And then my middle two daughters, they actually played basketball. And so I got into coaching basketball and softball, and they both played, and you know, it just got to be a lot to manage. I told my dad, I said, it's time to sell, or you're going to have to take over and do it all, you know. So he did. Used to be my wife did all the paperwork and paid all the bills and stuff, and she, you know, she was getting tired, wanting to do the girl thing too, and so I let him do it. But it wasn't as much fun, you know, trying to go to a basketball or a softball tournament and hurry home to get in the car to go racing. It was wearing on me. I had my youngest daughter. She went to the state championships in softball. I was a coach out of Warren, and we ended up losing 1-0. Yeah. It was, I mean, they all did well. They were all athletic. My middle daughter was a basketball player, and she was tall. And I can remember telling her, if you dunk that ball, I'll buy you a Corvette. And she wouldn't dunk. She said, I don't need to jump. I'm the tallest one out here. I don't need to jump. And she was getting all the rebounds, but I knew she would have a college waiting for her if she could dunk the ball, but she, you know, she didn't care.
Well, when she watches it, and her family watches this and saying, Corvette?
Yeah.
Mom.
Yeah.
Mom.
Yeah, the boys are going to be mad. Her husband probably. But
Yeah. Exactly. So is it now, do you watch it? Do you go to the races at all? Do you do that?
I'll go up here once a year, like when they have the World Outlaws. I'll probably go up to that, but I got the Flow prescription. It's not a prescription, it's a subscription, but I call it the prescription, you know. It keeps me home, and I can sit. One thing nice about that, I tell everybody, you can sit and eat a bowl of ice cream while you're watching them race. You couldn't do that at the state line with all the dust and stuff. But
Yeah, I know.
yeah. But I like they're very competitive. I like the way they do things, you know.
Franny Siemens took over for Len and Company, and if you don't have a Fran Siemens story, I'd be shocked.
Oh, what was it? First of all, when we built our late model, I went out and he gave me a whole Chevelle chassis to take up to Tony White. I mean, Franny was a race guy at heart, you know. And he also, when I was building cars, he asked me to what kind of front end he would have. Well, at that time, Tri-City Buggy was pretty quick, pretty fast, and so I told him he had to try the Tri-City Buggy front end. Well, he had it built, the car built. He says, all it wants to do is spin out on me. So I got in it and went out to Erie one night, and that thing would fly. And I don't know what he had in it for a motor, but all had rear brakes, and as soon as you touch the brakes go in the corner, you were swapping ends. And I said, I looked around in that car and I'm looking for a brake adjuster. There's no brake adjuster. So I got in after the race. I went in the pits and I said, Franny, the only thing you need is front wheel brakes. And he put some front wheel brakes in it and he started doing very well. But I couldn't believe he couldn't figure out that needed an adjuster, because when I raced, my adjuster was my favorite tool when I was racing. You know, you could start with a heavy fuel load and need lots of rear brake, and then as the race went on, you were going to the front, you know, using the front brake. By the time the race was over, I was pretty much all front brake. But so that was a very important thing out there. And you wouldn't think so, sitting in the stands watching the guys that they use brakes a lot. But I was always working on my brakes. So, and I told Franny that, you know, and he understood it then. But I don't think he raced that long. I don't know what he did. He sold the car to somebody or whatever. But then one time there was a guy up in New York State asked me to come up and do a radio show with him. And he said, you can bring somebody along if you want. And I called Franny. I said, how would you like to go do a radio show? And he said, yeah. We went up there. Took our wives, went up there, and the wives sat out in the car and listened on the radio. We did the show, and they critiqued us when we come out, but it was interesting. You know, Franny did a good job on that radio show, probably a lot better than I did. So it was interesting.
Randy, what was the radio program at State Line?
The Pit Road Show?
Oh, the Pit Road Show.
Is that the one you're talking about?
No, this was another guy further up north. It wasn't the Pit Road Show. He was.
How was he as a track owner?
I enjoyed him. I didn't have any problems with him, and I think he liked me. You know, I don't. There were some people that didn't like him, like I know my father-in-law didn't enjoy him that much, but I never had a problem with him. You know. Alfred said he was changing the rules every week, and you know, I don't know. I never had a problem and never figured anything out there, but he was funny. I know one time he was nice. There was a big race up there, and I hadn't been running there. I'd been traveling. Went up that night, and I had to start in the back, but there was a big race, and went out there and started coming up through, and they had a yellow flag. And you had to finish in the top 3 or 4 in the heat race. I don't know what it was. But this was in the Concy, and I got up to 4th. I guess we broke in the heats, what happened. So I got up to 4th in the heat race with a couple laps to go, and there was a big pile up. So we stayed 4th and run around there and run around there and run around there. And finally got going again, and they had another pile up. Before we got a lap in, whoa, they put me back to 6th. So I went. Franny was in the infield. I knew he was in the infield in the car, sitting in there. You remember that? Franny used to sit in the infield. As soon as that race was over, I went right in the infield, and I said, Franny. He said, I know, I'm putting you in. Yeah. So, I mean, that was nice. He didn't have to do that. But, you know.
He was the king of the hill.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the life of me, I don't know why I lost 2 positions under yellow when we hadn't had a lap in, you know, and he didn't know it either, but it was good. Yeah. He made it good.
Out of curiosity, there was a period of time where some of the drivers went elsewhere. They didn't stay at the track. It was, I think, probably a loyalty test. You must drive, and so some of them went elsewhere for a period of time. Were you part of that?
Yeah. Chubb went and ran Stars. I went and ran Stars. Ron did probably a year after me. But who else might have done that?
Danny.
Oh yeah, Armbruster and Chubb and I all went to Stars the same year. But I know Danny didn't enjoy it. His brothers did. But he even said he didn't really enjoy it. And it did make long nights, you know. It made long nights, and then my daughters started getting to where they were doing things, and that's when I quit doing that. You know, I just stayed local. But then when Franny came out with that tire rule, I just couldn't afford that tire rule. I just started racing I went to Smethport, actually.
Right.
Because I ran over there on 3 back tires all year. That's how nice the track was. And I think I won 7 or 8 races that year on the same tires all year. And those things at State Line, you run once, you might as well pitch them out in the field somewhere. They just,
Right.
yeah. And I'm sure he knew it, but I think he had a contract there with them to finish out however many 1 or 2 years he had them. I'm pretty sure he had didn't he have a contract there? I think so. And so he had to stick with it as much as he knew we didn't like it.
This has been terrific. And Miles, I just appreciate you. But as you're driving up here today, was there a question you thought I would ask that I haven't?
I don't know, maybe about my dad and what happened, at the end. But he got cancer toward the end, and so we were driving back and forth to Cleveland and doing stuff and trying to race too, and that wore on us. And then when he passed away, I just kind of parked the car for a little bit, took the motor out and had it rebuilt. And when I got it back, my brother decided he owned half the car, and he took the motor and went racing somewhere else. So I just liquidated everything else. I just it wasn't a glamorous way out. I'd like to have had a retirement deal like a lot of the guys have, but it wasn't meant to be, I guess.
Well, we can arrange that. We're going to have a special retirement party for you, Miles, and have Dick deliver the hamburger.
All right. Tell him wings. Yeah.
I don't think that'd be the right thing to do.
As a matter of fact, I retired from State Line undefeated because they had a mechanics race there one year, and I took Kelly's car out and won.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Talk about bringing in a ringer for the mechanics race.
I don't think they knew it was me in the car.
Well, they did afterwards after
Yeah.
they lapped the field.
Yeah. But that was a good car. It worked good for that class. I think that was the year he won the point championship. So.
That's Kelly Frederick, right?
Yeah.
And is that Ron's son?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I met Ron in his twilight years here. He's a little older than I am, still kicking, but I did not know he was a good super softball pitcher and all this and that till I read the thing in the paper about him.
Yeah. There's an interview with Ron.
Yeah. He's a character. I saw him. I don't know what happened to State Line one night. Some guy come over and give Kelly a hard time, and Ron had him right by the throat. I thought, oh my gosh, Ron. So I knew he was.
Sometimes tempers get flared on the track, and then you park the car. And did you ever see activity in the pits?
Oh my gosh, it used to be a daily occurrence on Saturdays at State Line. I know one time we were racing a race out there, and I was running like 3rd or 4th, and the car was overheating, and I was getting frustrated, and I was trying to keep it cool, and it was only about halfway through the race, and Denny Colvenbeck come flying out of the pits, right into me, knocked me in the infield, come back out, and I couldn't get by him for nothing. And after the pits, I went out there and we were rolling around under Jim Palero's car. And Jim finally come over and said, "Hey, come over here." He had his trunk open and he had all kinds of beer and pop in there. "Come on, sit down, have a drink."
So Jim.
Yeah, Jim was.
That's a great story.
Yeah, he was a character. And Denny and I were friends after that. He actually bought one of my older cars, but it was something. I'll never forget that. But other than that, it was a little bit of hollering and cussing and swearing and sign language a lot of times, But other than that, there wasn't. I never got in a fight.
Was there much collegiality after the race among the drivers? I tell you that we learned in the early days, we did those interviews, that those guys as a family, they kind of go out in the back and have hamburgers and beers and stuff like that. Did you have that same thing happen?
Not so much. There was after the races there in the pits, somebody always would invite you over. But as like with Ron and the Hoffmans and us, we didn't. We'd go home and get some rest because we knew what we had to do the next day. Yeah, and we could have, and we probably should have, But we had family get-togethers in the off season. Took care of all that, I guess.
Well, again, we should ask about your racing against Ron and Dutch. I mean, these are
Tim and Jeff.
Yeah.
Did that get to be conversations at the reunions?
One time. Yeah. Actually, and you'll never guess who it was, but Jeff and I got into it at McKean County one night. But it was just, the track was muddy, and I was trying to pass him, got inside him, he come down, and we just tore the sides off each other's car, and then, I mean, it was after the race that actually his dad come over and was hollering at me, but I never seen Don get mad before, but it's racing. So Ron, I can remember one night my rear end broke. Ronnie was right behind me. We were coming up through the field. My rear end broke, and we hooked on, went right up in the infield, and somebody come over and was after the race was complaining that Ron took me out. I said, no, I didn't. He didn't. But actually, I got out of the car and pulled Ron's fenders away from the tire so he could keep going because I knew I was done. But that's the way it is. I would do it for anybody. I mean, I knew what happened. Nobody else knew what happened.
Randy, any questions you might have?
Miles, what did you do for a living?
I was a welder fabricator at PDM Steel. And do you know what they're known for?
No.
The St. Louis Arch was built where I worked there.
Yes.
It was actually my dad worked on it. I didn't. It was gone in the 60s before I started working, but we worked there, and then the guy that owned it was old, and his kids didn't want it, so he sold out the Chicago Bridge and Iron. They moved it to Texas, and I was out of a job. So I went to GE for a few years till I retired.
In Erie?
Yes. But still, I built locomotives in Erie, and it was hot. But, that's what I did. And that's how my dad and I did our racing, because we would fabricate stuff ourselves instead of going out and buying it, But that's the only way we could save a buck.
Speaking of amazing, you were amazing, and I'm thrilled you came up and shared these stories.
Oh,
And the good thing
I'll probably think of some more, but
you can convey them to Randy.
yeah.
You could tell us the stories at your reunion.
Yeah.
The reunion,
And your retirement party.
Yeah, when the burger and wings show up.
Yeah, I don't hold my breath.
Bring your wallet.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're going to get a picture here.
All right.